There it is, the epic sound that tells you it is Tuesday night. The 17th day of March. Is it St. Patrick's Day? I don't notice. I just don't notice these kind of things anymore. Almost didn't make it to air, but here I am. Anyway. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in via your apps of choice on your fondle slab of choice, whatever else. Those of you who decided to come to ucy.tv/TOE, I appreciate that as well. And, of course, all the regular listeners to the ucy.tv radio network, thank you for showing up. And catching it further downstream, whether you got it on YouTube or you happen to download it or pick it up from the archives, which are also available at ucy.tv/TOE. So it's Tuesday night, and I haven't been able to keep track of much because, after all, I keep getting hit with all these stories about the murder, the Durst murder. Isn't that really what's important in the world? I don't know, man. I don't know. I just don't get it. I don't get it. Durst murders, murders. I don't know. Somebody killed somebody, so therefore it's a good story, I guess. The fact that tens of thousands of people are being wiped out on a daily basis by all sorts of mechanisms, that's got nothing to do with anything. But hey, what can I say? Oh boy, and another weird thing that's going on is that I keep getting trolled on the Skype, which is an odd situation. Anybody else having this problem where, I don't know, 20-something-year-old girls, purported to be 20-something-year-old girls, are just hitting you up and telling you they're bored and they want to show you something. They want to hook up with you, so on and so forth, because they found you in the Skype directory. Is anybody else getting this, or is it just me? Anyway, it is Tuesday night, so that does mean that I always have on my friends from the Liberty Beacon. That is the Liberty Beacon, all one word.com. Of course, in the first hour, we generally have Roger Landry, and he's going to be coming up in just a second. And I got to say that it has been a great joy to do the Tuesday night with the Liberty Beacon radio broadcasts every single week. Of course, in the second hour, we'll have Ariana Love again. And this time, we're going to get into that subject that she was talking about briefly, and saying, you don't want to get me started on Syria, so I figured I'll give her another hour to get her started on Syria. Okay? That's what I thought would be a good idea. Hey, Roger, how are you tonight, sir?
Well, I'll tell you something. You open up that can of worms with Ariana, and you're going to get a virtual cornucopia, a flood of information. She's been doing a lot of research on that area.
Well, right, and she has a lot of concerns about the Middle East, which is why I said, we'll probably wind up discussing a lot of different conflicts about the Middle East, and I put conflicts in quote, and I put the Middle East in quotes too, because, to me, this is just, a symptom of the worldwide domination spectrum that's happening. Of course, we've talked about this several times, the mechanism of the military-industrial complex, being the key stick that is being utilized by the bully, right?
Well, if you consider the military industrial complex, it is the tool. If you consider who is the the basic, I don't know, perpetrators, then you have to consider there is a lot of players, and I don't mean by world population standards. I mean by the owners and operators of very, very large corporations or cabals. And we would be talking about things like the chemical industry. We would be talking about things like the pharmaceutical industry. These are global endeavors that bend and twist sovereignty and nations' laws to suit their bottom line.
Right, and the reality is that nowhere in the world is it such a stark illustration of the the corporate and it's beyond corporate, but I mean I have to relate it to the corporate domination of populations. I mean, you see people being victimized in the Middle East not only by the continuous warfare, but by things like sanctions and all sorts of chicanery involving the banks, involving the greater corporations, and what it is they decide to visit upon these people as a constant. And it's one of those injustices that is really out of sight and out of mind for a lot of Americans, and it always bothers me, because they can do it there, they can do it here, a little bit of a twist on that whole, if we don't fight them there, we'll fight them here. Well, yeah, guess what? That's something that we need to take in mind in the, in the freedom movement, in the patriot movement, whatever it is you want to call it, in the liberty-minded group of individuals who are sort of coming together. We need to keep that in mind that, unless we do battle with them on a global scale, we're going to deal with them on our front doors. That's a guarantee, you
How
know.
about in the anti-genocide movement? Because that pretty much covers it all. But
Hmm.
when I discuss things like the New World Order, I always like to talk about the lowest common denominator. Where does this all lead? And what people need to understand, because people are like, well, if the world's coming to an end, why are they doing all this and why are they doing this? Well, let me explain something to you. Why are these huge corporate cabals, and they are international corporate cabals, okay? They are not, it's not just one big company in the United States, because that big company might have its headquarters in the United States, but it controls, say, the legal drug trafficking across the planet. So we're talking about huge cabals.
Hmm.
What we have seen in the last generation, it has been accelerated, and even more so in the last decade, is these people are doing everything they can to increase their profits to such a high level. And what are they doing with all of these profits? Because if the monetary system collapses, their money's going to be as worthless as yours and mine. It's not money they're worried about. Look behind the curtain. Toto is pulling aside for you. What you're going to find is that these huge corporations are going around and they're buying up land. They're buying up properties. They're buying up companies. They're buying up resources.
Hmm.
Yes, they understand as much as you and I that if the dollar collapses, their dollar is not going to be worth any more than yours at. But they have the title, the deed to this mine. They have the deed to this company. They have the deed to millions of acres of land. They have the deed. So when the system does flush out and change, they immediately shake out as being at the top of the pyramid because they own anything on the planet that's worth owning. So these big
Hmm.
companies are not worried about sticking cash aside. There is more, there is 10 times the value of every asset on this entire planet combined in the derivatives bubble.
Right.
When that bubble pops, everybody's money is going to be worthless. But if you own anything or everything of value on this planet, you are the new royalty.
Right, and that ranges from the simplest of things that people don't consider in a lot of cases, which are, things like, wow, water.
Water,
Water.
yes.
Bodies of clean, fresh water are owned
Food,
by, the food is owned by, this is what the reality is. And that's what you meant when you were talking about resources, not just, gold, coal, oil, stuff like this, the commodities market the way it looks right
everything
now.
that is worth everything on this planet that has intrinsic value,
Right.
because their money, as I just said twice and I'll repeat one more time for emphasis, will be as worthless as your money.
Hmm.
But what they own will make them the new, I don't know, let's go back to the days of the knights and in olden Europe, where these lords didn't necessarily have a lot of money, but the land you worked, the land you lived on, the food you ate was all their courtesy of the ownership of those lords. They lorded over you.
Mm.
Okay, it wasn't the money, because there's a lot of lords, if you go back 1,500 years or even 600 or 700 years, that didn't have a lot of wealth, but they owned immense amounts of land. And every serf that lived within those townships surrounding those castles, which offered protection, was owned by that lord. And that lord, at the end of the growing season, said, okay, and I'm not sure exactly what the percentages were back then, 50% of everything you grew belongs to me. And to the people who produced things, okay, 50% of whatever you produced belongs to me. So they owned the what had intrinsic value: the land, the property, the resources for the smith to make his swords, and so on and so
Hmm.
forth. So again, they realize their money isn't going to be worth anything. Look behind the scenes at the purchases being made by these filthy rich individuals across this planet.
Right, and to break it down in the most simple terms, this is the real slavery that has been, out there, visited upon every single population, from time immemorial. If you control all of the things that the population requires to live, you control the population. It's that
Absolutely.
simple. And the concept of serfdom, a lot of people say that's a romantic idea, and it's one of those things that we don't fully understand. And what else are they going to do? And well, there was a lot of other options, but if you grew up in that system, just like you grow up in the system today, where you fully put your faith in the dollar, those little pieces of paper that are backed by nothing at this point in time, you know, this is the system you grew up in. This is what you understand. I mean, you're going to perpetuate the system simply by existing. And this is what they did, and this is what continues to happen. And of course, the long range plans make a lot of sense when you consider if they control all the resources, they control all the things that you need to live. Therefore, there you go. Your destiny is not in your own hands until you actually take it. But anyway, interesting how conversations like this sometimes begin with the strangest thing, though, don't they, Roger?
That's
Because
an understatement.
a small thing that we passed around, and we look, we're all involved. Any of us that's involved in doing this kind of work and getting word out and trying to illustrate points to people about what's going wrong in the world around them. And please take off the these sunglasses or put them on if you're in the they live world, right? Actually see what's behind everything. Try and look around it. We make points to people, and sometimes we use little clips of things to illustrate it and all that. And I found it funny that last week, being passed around, and of course Barry Prince, I'll give credit where credit's due. He passed it to me. This thing about Barney Miller, right? TV show, innocuous kind of thing. I mean, relatively popular at the time. Had a spin-off called Fish, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, part of the culture was the Barney Miller show, like in the early '80s. You know what I mean?
I not only know what you mean, but Barry also passed that little clip to me. And what do you think I did with it, Chuck?
Well, the same thing I did, which was pass it to everybody that you possibly could to say, see.
No, actually, I wrote an article for it.
Well, yeah, but see, that's your way of doing it. For me, it was like, here's the clip. Now think about it. You took it a step further, and of course wrote an article about it. And everybody's like, well, why the hell are these guys talking about some TV show that's been, gone for 30 years plus, whatever. Well, there is an interesting thing that happened on that television show because every once in a while, in, the entertainment mediums, right? Every once in a while, they spill a little bit of truth into their matrix of, unreality
Intentionally.
intentionally, and it's kind of funny to see it. And to put it in context today, it's the kind of thing that slipped by probably every single viewer at the time, as the rantings of a madman, which is what they always try and portray this stuff as, right? And isn't it interesting? What were they talking about on Barney Miller in 1981, of all things?
Well, when I saw the clip, I immediately, and Barry started laughing because, and less than an hour after he sent me that clip, I sent him back his clip with an article, and his message to me was, "I knew you would do that. That's why I sent it to you." So here I am. I'm on one of his strings. So let me get through this because it's a rather short article, and I'm sure it's going to spark quite a bit of conversation between you and I that will more than fill up this hour. So the title of the article that contains the Barney Miller clip is New World Order and Trilateral Commission Explained on Barney Miller in 1981. All right, now as a bit of a preface, I'm 60 years old. In 1981, okay, if you do the math, I was close to broaching my 30s.
Mm.
All right. And yeah, I was one of those people who watched Barney Miller every single week, or if I was in the country or not under the ocean somewhere. I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. It was just a highly entertaining show. So
Right, and just
again,
just for contextual purposes, I mean, I was 9 years old, and television was definitely something that I enjoyed. Of course, it was a black and white TV with blah 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 blah. You know what I'm going to say,
yeah,
but either way, yes, this was something that was just kind of there. It was part of the culture, and of course, we didn't have the huge choices that they have today. In entertainment, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have 1,000 channels on your cable network, you didn't have satellite TV, as it exists today, all this kind of stuff. So, I mean,
you didn't even have a cell phone.
oh no, no, I forget about that one all the time. You're right. Cell phones didn't come out till a couple of years later, really, and then they were really, really for rich people, and they carried them in suitcases.
I had one of those. I worked for the DoD, and I had one of the first. We called them portable phones
Mm.
or transportable phones, and yeah, it weighed a few pounds, and if you had one that wasn't in a suitcase, it was about the size of a lunchbox and weighed about a dozen pounds.
Mm. Or it was mounted in a car. There was such thing as a car phone too.
Yes.
That was another thing. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Little trip down memory lane real quick, but there it was.
So let me give the title again, and I'll skip through this as quickly as possible. New World Order and the Trilateral Commission Explained on Barney Miller in 1981. Okay, before the dawn of the internet as a source of instant news on any subject from any part of the planet, there were only newspapers, news magazines, radio, and television to glean information from. And we suffered as a society, unbeknownst to us, from a lack of the truth or an overabundance of propaganda, lies. These so-called news sources were owned and operated by global elite with an agenda, and that agenda always took priority over the health and safety of the societies they claimed to serve. Um, this can clearly be seen in a quote accredited to William Casey, director of the CIA, in 1981, which coincidentally is the same year this episode of Barney Miller came out. And that quote is, "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false." But every once in a while, The truth did surface only to be ignored or laughed away because it just seems so ridiculous or insane that situations or organizations such as this could even exist, never mind proliferate tyranny or evil in any considerable fashion. America, even today, is a society that exists on programmed lies, but we are still much more aware than those of even 3 decades ago. And here I inserted a meme I made up, and on the meme, it says, "My president says I live in a democracy. My Congress says my rights are intact. My senator says the wars are almost won. My accountant says the dollar is sound. My nutritionist says GMOs are healthy. My doctor says vaccines will never harm me. My pharmacist says these drugs will cure me. My weatherman says chemtrails are not real. Holy crap, I'm surrounded by liars, and it seems I'm one of the very few awake to this. Okay, it can be so lonely and frustrating being aware in a world dominated by narcoleptic people. Thank God for you, my friends. All right, and then my article continues, and it states, and please, if you did grab the link Chuck gave you, watch this 2.5 minute clip. It's not very long, but it will make the point. And of course, the article says, please watch the attached video to see a perfect example of this veil of influence. The Trilateral Commission and the concept of the New World Order existed even then. As a matter of fact, at that point, it was the New World Order was a very old concept, and anybody who is even remotely awake is more than familiar with their goals: the secession of national sovereignty and the institution of a one world government controlled by oligarchical megacorporations and banksters. So, was this the truth being told in this sitcom? Yes, it was. But due to the negative spin put on it by this show, which was a very popular show, it was made quite apparent anybody who believed this information was to be branded a conspiracy nut or a subversive individual. Even more important is that the desired influence on the watching public was quite successful. I remember that episode, and I remember personally thinking what a nut job this guy was. Today, I look back on that with a little bit of embarrassment. Yes, we have come a long way thanks to the internet, but due to the propaganda and conditioning so well instilled in the majority of American society, we must still struggle to overcome its influence by those we affectionately or not call sheeple. All right, and then you see the clip, and again, it's only 2 minutes 29 seconds, so 2.5 minutes out of your life, well worth the watch. Okay, we may look at this today and laugh to ourselves at just how naive we were, and in too many cases, a majority of us still are. But many of us are much more aware today. Now it is time to awaken those still trapped in the prison of propaganda. So, sometimes being the only one awake in a crowd is so frustrating. Help put America back on the right path. Adopt a sheeple today. The
Well. And and this is just another one of those examples. Of course, it's early because people say that, this concept was born in the 90s, that people became aware of this in the 90s. This actually was around a long time before, and yeah, I do
He was
state all the time.
around in the 1700s.
Right.
The New World Order was a plan in the 1700s. Any and all who don't believe that, you need to do some research. The concept of the New World Order has been around for hundreds of years. Anybody who believes that these elites who have been around for a very, very long time, how long do you think the Rothschild family has been around? We're talking about centuries they've had control. They have we're talking about in the 1700s, Rothschild stating, I care not who issues a country's, who makes the laws in a country, as long as I can make the money. If I'm issuing the money, I'm controlling that country. And this was kings in the 1700s. What people need to understand is these people don't have a rush on anything. And they have a very large mechanism of control, and it's like an aircraft carrier or a luxury ocean liner. You don't make a hairpin turn on an aircraft carrier. If you're going to make a 90-degree turn, it might take you 2 to 3 miles of ocean to make that 90-degree turn because you're turning a few small degrees at a time. Well, it is the same way with an influence of an entire human society. You can't step up and say, today all the rules and all the laws have changed. So everybody needs to be on board today. That would never work, and it would immediately breed pushback and warfare and revolution across the planet. But if you make that change or that turn, like that ocean liner does, or like that aircraft carrier does, a few small degrees at a time, the end result is still going to be the same. These people work in generations. These people work in centuries. And I would tell you, you could go back a millennia to see the birth of a lot of what we see today. So anybody who feels that just because a lot of Americans have become aware of the concept of a new world order over the last generation, that this is a generation old, you're only missing it by about 400 years.
Well, right, but you know what I meant was
I'm
that the
sorry, did I take this off track?
no, not at all. I just wanted to make clear what I meant. Of course, I'm aware of how long the concept has existed. What I'm saying is that those who don't believe it is real, that those who believe that this is some wide-eyed, crazy conspiracy theory, okay, those who believe that say that this stuff only started to really emerge in the 1990s. Okay, that this was not even spoken about, prior to that. And of course, they're wrong. Okay, this was being discussed. It just wasn't. How shall I put this? It wasn't as widespread. Let's just say there was a very small factions of individuals talking about this. You know,
And you
and
didn't have the internet, which could proliferate a person's thoughts across the planet with relative ease.
well, and also instantaneously. And I point this stuff out about, trying to research documents relating to the JFK case and trying to interview people and sharing that information with one another. We used to do this by postal mail, right? So it could literally take 2 months for your little like circle of mailing buddies to actually get a piece of information all together all at the same time to everybody having read it, right? This kind of thing can now be done in 10 seconds with email, or whatever else. You know what I mean? I mean, email, I'm talking, a lot of people don't even bother to use email anymore, but I'm just saying that instantaneous connection with one another has changed the game regarding getting together and actually collecting your information. This is the positive end of the pool. You know what I mean?
Well, and also to lend a little credence to these people who think that this concept has really only been put in the front end of our frontal lobes, so to speak, over the last decade or the last generation. I would tell you that what we are seeing is a acceleration of the plans. Now, this is an acceleration of their plans that has been caused by individuals such as you and me and everybody else who speaks the truth. Because I really don't think that these people who plan and perpetuate and perpetrate the New World Order really took into account the massive influence and the massive education that would be tripped off by this mechanism. So, what they are seeing today is the things they are doing that might have been visible to individuals in a small area of the world, but the word never really got out beyond that. With the internet now, if something's happening in the Ukraine, or something's happening in Nigeria, or something's happening in Brazil, that news is splashed across the planet almost instantly. So what we are seeing by necessity is an acceleration of these programs, which brings them more into the light. So they are relying less on isolating words and more on discrediting those of us who put information out, because there is so much word. So what we are seeing is, again, a massive acceleration of their programs, because so much of us, or so many of us, are aware. And we all, what the last line in my article was, let's help put America back on path. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Adopt a sheeple today. I'm of the firm belief that there is nobody on this planet, unless they are complicit with those perpetrating this evil, who cannot be reached and convinced. It may take longer for some than for others, but each and every person, if we have the patience, we can reach these people. When I say adopt a sheeple, what I'm saying is I have done this. I have spent 2, 3, 4 months convincing people that what they are seeing is a mirage. What they are seeing is not reality. Toto, call me Toto. I'm pulling this curtain back for you. Take a look. There's the wizard pulling the levers. But the fact remains that you cannot jump on these people and throw in their face, the world's going to come to an end. They're going to kill off 95% of us. They're going to look at you and their eyes are going to go glossed over and they're going to go, yep, Roger. Okay, Roger. Anything you say, Roger. Let's have another beer and shoot another game of pool. All right. But the method I use is I germinate an idea in the first conversation. The next conversation, we take that idea and we expand it out. One idea, one concept. The third conversation, we add a little bit more to it. And these are intelligent people, or hopefully most of the people that I deal with or that I call friends are intelligent people. So when you're telling the truth and you can base it on facts and you're feeding it to them in bits, not in dump truck full, but in bits, so that it's easy for them to swallow, then over a period of a couple of weeks or a couple of months, you can get them to a point where they are willing to look over their shoulders at that mirage and realize that what they're seeing isn't, they might not be an ardent activist at that point, but now you've got them questioning things. If each and every one of us in this movement, whether it's the liberty movement, whether it's the health movement, whether it's the geoengineering movement, they all lead back to the same evil idiots. All of them. Every one of these mechanisms, if you rail against vaccines, if you rail against GMOs, if you rail against political tyranny, if you rail against perpetual warfare, they all come from the same beginnings. They're all controlled by the same people. So now, after a few days or a few weeks or at the most a few months, you have an individual who is questioning something a short while ago he was taking as a fact. And if each and every one of us did that, we could have millions, tens of millions, over 100 million or more people standing next to us, and we would be speaking in a unified voice in a year or less. This isn't a guess. What I'm telling you isn't a guess. This is a fact. But too many of us holler to a big audience and we never stand around to see how effective our word has been. I'm not accusing you guys of screwing up. If you've got a website and you're putting a great word out, fine. But amass your troops, people. If you have supporters on that website and they believe in what you say and they know what you say, these are the people you need to let loose on the sheeples. Everybody go out and adopt one sheeple. You convince that individual the first thing he's going to do, because he lives in a pack of other sheeples.
Mm-hmm.
This is where he got most of his information from. They're a group that sit around together every day and drink beer and say, this crazy person, you know what he said? Well, what if you got a hold of one of them and convinced them that all was not what they expected? The next time they're sitting down having a beer with their friends and one of them says, "Did you hear what this idiot said about this? That guy's got to be totally nuts." This guy's going to say, "Well, maybe not."
See, and I liken this to the psychological version of what was the Greek or Roman concept of the phalanx. Okay? Because you built that one man at a time, placing him next to another man who is in charge of defending the man next to him. If you build an army in that way, you end up with an impenetrable wall. Okay? That's the reality. This has to be done one at a time. It is great that we get out there and get the word out to massive audiences. You're right. But at the same time, we do need to take a moment and make sure that that's being understood and spread around. Because the important differences are not necessarily going to be made on this mass scale. Okay, we get together here. I mean, look, the people that decide to tune into my show, the people that carry, their phones or whatever, and they tune into UCY because they know it's time to listen to this, or to listen to or like Dane Wigginton, or if they want to listen to somebody else who's focused on the banks, or somebody else who's focused on the technocracy, or somebody else who has a focus on A B C D E F G. It doesn't matter. All of the things that we care about, they're already on board to some degree. It is
Well,
the others.
if you stop to think, there are so many, and I love the way you put that. Let me amplify that a little bit, okay? If you stop to think, there are so many topic specific forums out there.
Mm,
There are forums that just talk about judicial tyranny in this country. There are forums
right.
that just talk about um, the way the Constitution is being trampled. There are forums that just talk about the GMOs or the vaccines or the geoengineering. There are forums, but this is a concept that I became aware of a long time ago when I was setting up programs and projects for companies and the DoD.
Mm,
The concept I became aware of is that you need to have all of this information, or a good deal of this information, in one spot. So if you take a look at the Liberty Beacon, we are not a topic specific project. If you go to our flagship site, you will find articles on political tyranny, perpetual warfare, fluoride, GMOs, big pharmaceutical, vaccines, geoengineering, anything that harms humanity.
social
Now,
programming, judicial misconduct,
but
political tyranny of all sorts, every walk possible, perpetual warfare, as you mentioned. All of these things actually are all covered in topic specific pieces, but they're all gathered together.
but the biggest trigger here is not that we have all these different types of tyrannies represented, is that we search about 40 to 50% of the articles that go up on the Liberty Beacon websites are gleaned from other really great sites. About anywhere from 40 to 60%, depending on the month or the week, are written by us. But if you look at the bottom of these articles, what you find are the two following comments. The Liberty Beacon highly recommends you visit geoengineeringwatch.org for more pertinent information and articles. And then right below that, see featured article and read comments here. So what we are doing is intentionally driving people who read that article, because obviously they're interested in that specific topic, back to that topic specific site. So we have a twofold mission. One is to make you aware of all the different evils being perpetrated against humanity simultaneously.
Mhm.
And two, where are these topic specific sites where you can get a virtual cornucopia of information? So I constantly tell people, practice what you preach. The Liberty Beacon Project and our websites are set up to practice what we preach. We firmly believe that they're all connected. That's why we set up a website like the Liberty Beacon and all of our other websites, to show everybody that there is a connection between all of these evils. But we don't post enough to make you an expert on those evils. We refer you back to the sites where you can spend some time and become that expert.
Right, and that is the point. So really, it's a a give and take actually, as opposed to just a one directional idea where it's come to us, just for the information, or go to them just for the information. You're not doing one or the other. You're actually doing both, which is what I find interesting here.
We are like a guide or an index,
Hmm.
if you prefer, or a bibliography. If you go to the back of a book,
Okay. Let's see. Do we have everything back? Looks like everything just took a wild spill on me there really quickly. So Roger is being called back, and there you are.
okay,
Sorry about that.
all of a sudden you went away.
Yeah, well,
That's
all of a
all right,
sudden
but
you were breaking up. You were making a point about the bibliography, and you started to just break up really badly, and then everything went bad on us all at once. I don't know
well,
why.
well, I do, but we won't get into that point at this time because we've already beat that to death too many times.
Mm.
What I was stating is that basically the Liberty Beacon Project is an index in the back of a very big book. Where you can look in the index, you can find a specific topic. It tells you what chapter discusses that particular topic, and you go to it. So we are an index for all of the really, really great sources of information that we can acquire across the planet. And this is the intent of the Liberty Beacon Project, is to give you as many good, valid sources, and they're not all the Liberty Beacon. We are not. We don't feel we're the do all end all, and we never will.
Well, right, and that is, but that is what the key is here. It's more like a bibliography to give you the references, to give you the points to go and study more in depth. We've given you the flavor of what's going on. Uh, of course, if you study the whole site too, that's the other interesting thing. Is if you just stayed at the Liberty Beacon, all one word .com. If you just stay there, you'll get a flavor of the total matrix, as it were, of tyranny. But you want to go, really deep on a particular subject, it absolutely gives you excellent places to go to. I mean, Geoengineering Watch is one of those examples. There are tons of others on there that I'm drawing a blank on at the moment, but I mean, there are tons of other examples, though, where I've seen, and you and I have gone back and forth on a
Yes.
lot of these articles where I've said, well, this is a great person who writes this, or a great, even radio shows you point to, different clips, different websites, you name it. There's all different things that you point out. And
Well, any website that tells you need to get all of your information from me. If you go anywhere else, you're not getting the truth. These are me people, and the Liberty Beacon Project wishes to have nothing to do with me people. We are we people.
mhm,
We, meaning it is something that needs to be available to everybody. So we are never going to be a website or a conglomerate of websites, which we are across the planet, that tells you that everything that you need to know is here, because that's not the truth. If we are truly fulfilling our mandate, or our basically our mandate is the eradication of programmed ignorance,
mhm.
then how the hell can we tell you we have everything you need to know to eradicate any ignorance you might come across? That's bullcrap, and any individual site that tells you that is lying to you. So
Right.
what would our task be? Our task would be to gather up some of the best sources on the planet and make them available to the supporters of the Liberty Beacon Project. Now we're doing what our mandate says we need to do.
No, absolutely, and that is the point, and that's really why I kind of fit in with this all the time, because that's exactly the concept of my show. I don't just sit here and talk about my solutions and my ideas and my beliefs about things. I bring on the best people I can find to discuss different subjects. That's what I've always done, because I don't have all the answers. I know that. And even in a collection of my, my friends and everything else, I'm always finding new people with other information, with better ways of describing things, with better ways of illustrating it, the better book, the better website, the newer whatever. It doesn't matter. There's always the search for information. It's nearly endless, and I'm always looking for the best possible things to present.
The
So,
day anybody tells me I have nothing, there's nothing you can teach me, or I have nothing more to learn, basically what they've just told you is they're dead and nobody's bothered to read their eulogy yet. My personal motto, what I like to tell everybody describes me the best, is I am an expert at nothing. Believe it, I'm not. But I know enough about just about anything to have an intelligent conversation about just about everything. And that's my role. My role is to learn as much as I can, to have intelligent conversations with the supporters of this project, and then point them to those experts to further their education. I want to open the
right.
door, but I want someone else to invite them in.
No, and I hear you, and that's exactly, basically the philosophy of what I'm doing on my little radio show is essentially what you're doing with the Liberty Beacon. It's almost the same thing. you know,
Yes. Well,
let
that's
us.
one of the reasons I like you, Chuck.
Now we know why.
I said one of the reasons.
Oh, okay. I do, and I appreciate that, but it's just to me that has always been the mark of somebody who is, in search for the best information, in search of, the best possibilities, in search of, that's the thing. It's the search for it, because anybody at any point who tells you they have all the answers to any one of these subjects, all the answers, I immediately, like you said, that's the end of it for me. I know that they're not telling me the truth. I know that they have allowed their own hubris to consume them. Their ego is out of control, and they have an idea that they are an authority, in fact, themselves. There are very
If
few people that I know that are actually even authorities on very narrow subjects. For somebody to tell me that they are an authority on, like, the whole world, I mean, it's nearly as unimaginable as the idea that, all these things have happened by coincidence and there is no collective plan here.
I have
Okay.
never met an expert in my life who was truly an expert, who knew everything about his subject. And the true sign of somebody who really endeavors to be an expert
Mm-hmm.
is the individual who is willing to learn when you present him with something that he was unaware of. Well, you know what? I really wasn't aware of that, but I'm going to check on that, and the next time we talk, I'll have something to say about it. This, to me, lends much more credibility when anybody tells me, and I don't care who they are, and I am a learned individual on a lot of topics, not an expert, a learned individual. But when someone says to me, I'm an expert at this, there's nothing you can tell me, the hair goes up on the back of my neck. Because now I'm either talking to a troll, a paid shill, or somebody whose arrogance supersedes the size of the Pacific Ocean.
Well, right, and again, even on a narrow subject, and like some people call me an expert on the JFK assassination, I don't. I'm somebody who studied it for a very long time, so I have
You're a learned individual. That's
when
my term for people like you. You are a learned individual on a specific topic.
right, and there's a couple of topics that I feel that I have a good grasp of what's going on. I don't think I can be easily misled on a lot of topics. But it doesn't mean that I know everything. And not even about that. And that's after spending more than half my life, intensely researching one event. Roger, we're talking about one event. So for people to try and tell me that they know everything about a particular science, about a particular area, about a particular history, or about history in general, I mean that is always. I mean, even before I was, a little more aware than I used to be, I never found that to be a credible thing, a credible statement to come out of anybody's mouth because
Well,
there's
the one,
always more.
well, even most scientists will tell you, or at least the scientists who are not arrogant beyond belief, will tell you that even what we call absolute science today is not an absolute. I can remember when I was young, learning in school that atoms were the smallest building block in the universe. Nothing was smaller than an atom. Well, it wasn't more than a decade after that was put out that they found out that atoms were made up of even smaller particles, and that those particles were made up of even smaller particles, and that the actual makeup of matter or mass or energy could be infinitely small and infinitely large. Let's take a look at an atom. Okay, it is what looks like a ball in the middle with a bunch of electrons and protons circling around it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and those electrons can. Well, let me ask you a question. What does the solar system look like to you? So it may well be that we have gone, when I was a child, that the atom is the smallest building block of anything in the universe, to it could be infinitely larger or infinitely smaller. So even science itself, things are taught were absolutes, are being proven as we learn more. They were not absolutes.
Well, right, and that's one of those fascinating things too, is the concept of of the atom and what was the smallest thing in the universe, and that was still being developed again 20 years later when I was in school, right? It was still a concept being developed at that point. It was thought still that there wasn't an infinity to it, even when I was in school, or maybe I was just in a school that was way behind. But either way, there wasn't a concept of the possibilities were endless. There was still this sort of finite understanding of size and of character when it came to things like this. And as we have learned over time, nothing seems to be exactly absolute, does it, Roger?
Well, and then they discovered something they called the God particle.
Oh yes.
We won't even get to go into that because we're supposed to be talking about the New World Order, and man, have we managed to diverge from that topic, haven't we?
Look, I'm sorry. I'm the king of the Segway
Of
sidetrack.
divergence?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, let me explain to each and everybody out there that so much of this is applicable to what we call the New World Order. The New World Order is an idea that whose time is about to come unless a lot of us stand up and push back very, very hard. It is its set goals are the elimination of national borders or sovereignty, the elimination of individual currencies, the elimination of individual rights, and you know, basically, we're talking about a concept whereby the richest, and via the money and the properties and whatever the wealth they've accumulated, whether it's real wealth or it's resource wealth, these are the rulers of the planet. So this concept has been around for a very long time. If we go back to the Rothschilds, we can see the Rothschilds lending money to the King of France. We can see the Rothschilds lending money to the King of England. We can see the Rothschilds. So even in the 1700s and earlier than that, they were establishing their stronghold in each and every one of these countries and tying them together through the mechanism of money
Hmm.
and wealth. And they exercised control over these kings. For anybody in any kingdom who thought that the power of their king was absolute, didn't look behind the curtain because Toto hadn't been born yet. He couldn't pull that curtain back yet. But you will find that a lot of these kings were in debt to these money suppliers. And it was, in fact, the will of these money suppliers who didn't impose their will in a very strong fashion, but they were steering the ship just like that big aircraft carrier, that ocean liner. They would nudge the king a little here or nudge the queen a little there and get them to move policy into a realm where that policy benefited, say, the Rothschild family more than it did the citizens of the kingdom. Why do you think there were so many revolts against kings and queens? Who do you think was pulling the strings 2, 3, 400 years ago? The same damn people who are pulling the strings today.
Right. And this is why communication was limited. This is why, serfs were not allowed to read. This is why, you know,
Yes,
because here's the real.
knowledge is power, and you never, ever impart power to the serfs.
Well, right. And here's the problem. Why? Why don't you ever impart power to the serfs, Roger? Because here's the deal.
Oh, you don't
It
want me to
is
answer that?
it is
Go ahead.
only, well, I'll give you my answer and then I'm
Oh,
sure
well.
you'll tag right onto it and we'll have a complete answer. Here's the deal. If the serfs realize that when they are collectively together, okay, and they exert influence, their influence outweighs that of the masters who are pulling those strings. If a collective influence of all the serfs is to be visited upon the power structure, guess which one actually wins?
Well,
This is what they figured out a long time ago, is that if they kept us all separated, all fighting with each other, all disengaged, that they would never be in any danger of being unseated. That's the reality of that power structure. Okay? And I think a lot of people forget that if we stopped fighting amongst one another, if we stopped allowing ourselves to be influenced into conflict, if we stopped allowing ourselves to do the damage to one another as human beings, they would be in a whole lot of trouble, Roger.
well, um, I, I agree with you so much that, and again, I like to fall back over and over on memes that I have done.
Mm-hmm.
And because basically what they are is they're thoughts that I feel are highly relevant and, you know, to specific issues or problems that we all suffer. And I did a meme on exactly that topic. And I've got to tell you, when we're discussing what we're discussing right now is, as far as I'm concerned, the basic solution to every issue we suffer today. Anything we can discuss comes back to the issue of how do we react as a body of peoples, okay? In the United States, that bodies of people are called we the people. So let me get to this meme here. I wrote a preface to the meme and then I'll read the meme. The preface to the meme is, according to the Constitution, we the people sit at the very top of the food chain, sovereign. And every politician that has ever existed in this republic is subservient to us and our collective will. No president or Congress can overrule the will of the people, but only if the people care enough to express that will. Any tyranny can be undone by the will of the people if they care enough to exercise their authority. Far too often we have not. And through apathy and complacency, we have allowed all we suffer. This is not a guess. This is a fact. And then it's followed by the picture meme, which reads, we the people suffer today due to our own ineptitude, because we have failed to exercise our inherent role in this grand experiment called America as the true governors of this republic. There is only one way back, one way to liberty as it was intended. Stand up together, speak in a unified voice, and reclaim our rightful governorship of this floundering republic, or go passively into subjugation. There is no other viable answer or solution. Now, what you said, Chuck, dovetails right into that. There are 315 million Americans. There is a power structure in this country that is less than 5,000 individuals at the top of that power structure. The thing that terrifies them the most, the reason we see this accelerated program today for the New World Order, is because too many of us are becoming too awake too fast. And when you piss 300 million people off, we are immovable, unstoppable, and you better listen to us.
And I could not have put that any better, that's for sure, Roger. Yes, but that is precisely the point, right? And on a larger scale, if we do this on a worldwide scale, tell me what cannot be accomplished.
Actually, when you're talking worldwide scale, we are talking close to 7.5 billion people against maybe 100,000 people who consider themselves elites on this planet. And truly, only about 10,000 of them would actually be considered elites, but they've got some pretty highly placed minions.
Right.
So when you're talking a ratio of 100,000 to 7.5 billion, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. Nothing. Amen.
That's it. And you know, one of the major things that comes up, and I know you've got to get going, Roger, and I do always appreciate your time, especially on Tuesdays, but I appreciate your time always, whether we're having a private conversation or whatever it is you do, and all of the time that you put in, putting out the articles, keeping the Liberty Beacon, which is only still just a little over 2 years old.
Yes.
The Liberty Beacon is only, and that is the Liberty Beacon, by the way, the Liberty Beacon, all one word.com. That is.
And that's only our flagship site.
That's the flagship site.
We have a lot of websites.
Absolutely. And the thing is, though, is that you can start there.
Yes.
You can start there and you can find everything else. That's for sure. And as you said, it's like a bibliography. You can take it in just about any direction you wish, and you can find whatever it is that you wish to focus on. But if you return to it, the spectrum is full, it is complete, it is nearly endless what's going on in the world. But I say again, there is a lot of hope if we all learn to stand together. One of the more interesting websites which is coming up, of course, is the Middle East Rising website. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, just like last week, I asked Ariana Love to come back. How are you tonight?
Oh, I'm fine. I didn't know you were going to address me so soon. Right
yeah, you
Hello,
never know with me.
Hello, Ariana.
Hi, Roger.
And one more time, I will state this before I go away. This is an extremely integral part of the Liberty Beacon Project, Ariana Love. She will be the senior admin and the controller of the Middle East Rising, and she will start broadcasting her own radio show by the same name in the very near future. This is all being worked on. But Chuck, I envy you the next hour because this is one of the most pleasant people you can talk to.
Well, not only is she pleasant to talk to, but she's also knowledgeable on, one of those undercovered topics as far as I'm concerned.
I didn't want to give her all the compliments. I wanted to leave a few for you.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that, Roger.
All right. Goodbye, Ariana. Goodbye, Chuck. Thank you so much. I enjoyed the show. I always do. I wish you both a very pleasant day. And Ariana, I'm sure we'll be talking later.
Surely.
Yes, and as soon as a few other things move forward, Roger, you and I will have to have some conversations again too. Hopefully this week.
All right, my friend. Goodbye.
All right, take care. Ariana, yes, Middle East Rising, and of course we have pointed out that you can find Ariana on Facebook if you like. I don't usually like to suggest Facebook, but it's one of those necessary evils in my life at this point. But anyway.
I also use Twitter. And it's actually gaining quite a momentum now. And all what I post on Facebook my Facebook pages goes directly to Twitter. It's at WB Gaza Free.
WB Gaza Free. Now, of course, in the little ad for the show tonight, I said that we were going to start off with Syria, because last time when we were talking, we brought up Syria, and you said, if you get me started on that, and you got to understand, with me, that's an invitation. I am, I'm alarmed by what has gone on. Forget about the mainstream narrative, okay? Let's just put that aside for a moment. I look at the total of what I understand about the, alleged American assets being involved in things over in the Middle East. I am watching the disastrous punishment of human beings on the ground there in various nations. Okay, and this has gone on throughout my lifetime. This isn't just post 9/11. This stuff was going on before that, and they tried to sell it to us as a great boogeyman, that every great boogeyman would be an Arab with a towel on his head. They tried to sell this to us as Americans when I was younger, but it didn't work. Nowadays, it has become an almost acceptable thing throughout most of American society that we are over there. It doesn't matter what happens to those people, because those are the people who did the damage to us on 9/11. Those are the people that have held us hostage through oil. Those are the people who have done all these evil things across the planet. That is the crap they have tried to sell the American people, and they are sort of winning, okay,
Right.
at this point in time. And I'm fed up. I'm beyond fed up, because I know I'm being lied to. I don't know necessarily all the facts, but I mean, I've had occasion to speak to people that were involved, with some of these alleged madmen and under these alleged madman regimes. I mean, even, let's bring up a name that has nothing to do with the exact region, but is always brought up. But, the whole Gaddafi thing that went on, all right, with Libya. If you spoke to Libyans, which most Americans do not do, you would not find that all of them thought that he was this, serial killer beast, extremely crazy man, because he was taking care of his people on a lot of levels that never got out to the Western world. Now, I'm not saying that he was a great guy. I'm simply saying that the whole story was never told. And it seems to me that the whole story is never being told in regards to the Middle East. Now, Syria is one of these things that is being, passed off in front of us as if we're chasing this construct that came out of Iraq and everything else. And these are, again, evil terrorists who are cutting people's heads off, and we have to punish. But at the end of the day, what I see and what I understand is that the civilian populations are taking the brunt of the punishment for this political game. Okay? And that's where my gut is on the issue. And you can correct me anywhere along those lines that you feel you need to, but that's what I see. What do you think?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The civilians are being, there's massive genocide going on in Syria and Palestine. More people are dying in Syria right now, and more people are losing their homes en masse. But this is a genocide that I've never seen anything like it. I mean, war is always done by deception. The public is always fooled into thinking that, diverting the attention from the ones who are actually doing it, which, as Roger was saying earlier, is a small percentage of people. And we think that we put the blame onto somebody else. We're manipulated into putting the blame onto somebody else, like Muslims. That false flag attack on 9/11 was used for multiple purposes, one of them being to put all blame onto Muslims. Now I think people know they're being lied to, but still, the brainwashing is so deep and so effective. It goes into people's psyches. It's very hard to change our thinking. But what does change our thinking is human connection. And that is the only way to humanize these people that are being killed. If you see them as not being human beings or being terrorists, and you label them all as terrorists, then it removes that personal connection. Why should you care? And this is what's happening. But it is the banking elite of this planet who don't really have any one particular nationality. They're so rich, they travel all around the world. They have names, they have faces, they have home addresses. And there, this has been going on for a very, very long time. And, the world is fed up, but we have to start putting our attention on them. We have to start putting our attention on the source of the problem. The entire financial banking system was created by them, and it's corrupt. We're in a system of slavery, and our governments are controlled by them now. And they've succeeded, like you said, they've succeeded in Libya, they've succeeded in Iraq, in invading Iraq, and now Syria. Now, Saddam Hussein, as I understand it, he was helped into power by the CIA, but he was not a Zionist. He was a dictator, and he was, horrible human being, but he was not a Zionist. They ousted him because he refused to take U.S. dollars for his oil, for Iraqi oil.
Right.
And that pissed off the bankers, And then Gaddafi.
Well,
Well, he
Gaddafi
was.
again, the same kind of thing with the banks.
Yeah.
He was extracting himself from the system, wasn't he? He was about to come out with his own currency that was going to be gold backed, I think.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. He was doing the right thing, in that sense, he was doing a smart thing. Now he was a dictator too, and he was very corrupt, but he had some principles. He was a defender of Palestine, and these dictators, they're a mixed bag. It's like they have some good traits and they have a lot of bad ones, because absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Well, right. I mean,
Gaddafi,
look,
yeah,
I'm not here saying that any of these guys who are, the archetype is generally speaking has always been presented to us as, the Middle Eastern strongman dictator. Okay, you can fit a lot of these guys into that archetype, and I'm not saying that they're great guys. What I'm saying is that only half the story is ever told. It's always
yeah,
utilized as a justification, for we need to be brutal with these guys because this is the way they are. Okay. And at the end of it all, when the smoke clears, the body count on civilians is never accurately represented. And even if it does somehow leak out that civilians have been killed and that, non-military targets are destroyed and so on and so forth, well, it's justified because it was a necessary evil because we had to fight a greater evil, you know.
hmm
And this to me is nauseating,
mm,
to see this repeated over and over again. And this again does not say that I'm in support of the Assad regime. I've never said anything like that. I don't know enough about him to be in support of him or to think that that we're doing the Syrians a favor with all this agitation. I don't know enough to say that, to be honest with you. But at the same
how
time, I
long
do
did
know
it
what's
take
being presented.
since our last since the last time we talked, the last broadcast? I did look up how long it took to find Saddam, and it was 8 months, and it took the U.S. government 6 months to find Gaddafi. How long do you think it would be for them to find? How long do you think it would take for them to find Bashar?
Well, realistically, or what do I
Yeah,
think will actually happen? you know,
I think it would take a lot less time than that. And right now, John Kerry is negotiating with Bashar about weaning him out of the regime after a couple of years. I have been saying this all along, and people have called me crazy for my posts, blah, 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 whatever. I mean, people will viciously attack me for when it comes to Syria. Now, we have a lot more supporters of Palestine, but when it comes to Syria, the people who are pro-Palestinian are pro-Bashar Assad. And it blows my mind. How can you be against the genocide of the Palestinians and yet before it's okay if Bashar is doing genocide on the Syrian people? Don't they realize these are the same people?
well, let's
These
yeah,
are the
see
same population of people.
see. Let's break this down though, because I think this is misunderstood. What is going on in Palestine, okay, is a wholly different issue. Okay, regarding who's actually in control and who's actually doing the
It
damage to the
depends on what
population.
floor of the building you're standing on
Okay.
and watching it. Yeah. If you're standing at the top, if you know what's going on at the top, you understand it's the same thing. It's the same people behind the genocide of both. The very people who established the state of Israel, the Rothschilds, and they are doing the genocide in Syria. You know, if you look at who bought the oil rights, okay, Israel sold the oil rights of Syria to Rothschilds, Murdoch, and Dick Cheney in
Right.
September of 2013. So, what business does Israel, who's not even in a nation, okay, not even a legitimate state,
Hmm.
what right do they have to sell the oil rights of another nation that is legitimate to anybody? This is a war crime. Now, the Rothschilds could not very well go into Syria and set up shop and start, getting their oil out of the ground that doesn't belong to them. So they sent in ISIS.
No, when you want to do something like that, you have to annex a part of a nation and call it something like Kuwait. Oh, did I just say that? Yeah, that's kind of what happened.
Yeah.
That's how Kuwait came to be, actually. But hey, who's keeping count, right? Yeah.
Bush family too. Bush family is involved in this. The Bush family has been is part of the cabal within the United States government and the CIA that basically, hijacked the United States government and organized 9/11, because that cabal, uses our tax dollars. This is the most sickening thing of all of this, is that, trillions of dollars have gone missing of taxpayers' money that is being used to fund this genocide.
Right.
And okay, let's talk about Syria a little bit. A lot of people don't know what actually happened there.
Well, yeah,
And I have,
let's try
yeah,
and do this. Let's try and do this for the
okay,
listener because I do think a lot of people are not aware of, the basic history here. And we don't have to go back in
okay.
ancient history, but let's give them an idea because, Syria was one of these countries, unless I'm mistaken, that, only maybe a decade ago was essentially what, part of the axis of evil that was supposedly part of the greater terrorist network, from the big threat, right? I do remember that
Mm-hmm,
Syria was part of that discussion, wasn't it? So,
mm-hmm.
how did that even come to be? Well, there was a lot of conflict, and there was all of this stuff that went on, relating, of course, to the Israeli move and all that, the Six-Day War, right? Okay.
That was Hafiz al-Assad, Bashar's father. He was in power then, yeah,
Very good.
when they
So,
took over the Golan Heights.
yep.
And
Now,
that was very interesting. A lot of people don't even know about that. Hafiz al-Assad had the backing of the Arab army, and he was going to war with Israel over the Golan Heights. And he very well could have kicked Israel back, and he didn't. It was very strange. All of a sudden, he called his troops back, and within 2.5 hours, Israeli tanks were rolling in and announcing on their blowhorns, for everybody to leave their homes. And it made no sense whatsoever. So I mean, what did he take a money bribe? I mean, how did these things come about?
well, it
You know,
seems as though, although I've never seen anybody prove it, with any certainty, that there was some sort of agreement reached here where he stood down in that
yeah,
particular moment because you're right strategically that should not have occurred. It was numerically
exactly.
a problem. They were outmatched. It would have at the very least slowed things down if nothing else, but they would have very likely defeated the Israelis right there.
Yeah, very likely. And look at, okay, another thing to point out. For example, Gaddafi's father was a Zionist. So he is the son of a Zionist. And basically when his card was pulled, he went rogue. He didn't do what he was supposed to do. Same with Bashar. Bashar's grandfather was a top degree Freemason. Now I don't know if you know anything about the Freemason Illuminati Society, but there's 33 levels, and when you get past the 30th level, there's been quite a few people who have, well, a small handful of people that have defected from the Freemason Society at the 30th level, because that's when the really sick rituals kick in.
Mm.
Like the pedophilia and, you know, child, uh, they bleed children,
All of
kidnap,
the sick,
all
dark,
of that
twisted
stuff. So,
things. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
so the point is that is a regime. The regime was put into power. All regimes are. By whom? By the Zionists, by the bankers. And it's done, so many decades in advance that the people just can't imagine that it was done by design.
Well,
Like,
how do you see that Bashar diverted? from the path
Okay.
that was laid out, though, because here's the thing. I mean, I don't mean to cut you off, but I do want to
Well,
try
he
to
didn't.
stay to the
He's
Syrian.
fully accomplice. Fully. The genocide in Syria the revolution could not have happened without him.
Mm.
Um, and this is just, it floors me when people support him. I just can't believe my ears. I get so angry. I mean, my whole body is shaking right now. It's so, this subject is so difficult because the crimes that are going on. Um, okay, what was your question again?
Well, I was saying, I'd like to explain how he started to diverge from, what he was
Okay.
supposed to do, and also,
Oh, he didn't.
and,
He didn't diverge. Actually, here's what happened. After his father died,
Mhm.
his older brother, who was 10 years older than him, about was supposed to take the leadership of the regime. But in a coup, no, it wasn't even a coup. No, it was he was murdered. He was driving down the road and somebody jumped the car and murdered him. And nobody knows or can explain how that happened. So Bashar was only like 22 or 23 when he took power. He was a young pup. And I think that that was done on purpose, obviously, because Bashar was more easy to control. Now, Bashar is a good little lapdog for the Zionists. I can tell you, he met with John Kerry for an entire year. He had over a dozen meetings in Damascus. John Kerry went over to Damascus and had, quaint little dinners with Bashar and Bashar's wife. And there's photographs of this.
Mhm.
And after a year of talks with John Kerry did a press release and said that Bashar is an ally to the United States and that he looks forward to a long and prosperous relationship. Something to that effect.
Okay.
Okay, right after that, Bashar went to Jerusalem and he had a meeting with top level Zionist officials. Okay, and the only press representative to attend that meeting was a staunch Zionist who runs a staunch Zionist newspaper in the United States.
Mhm.
And he did a press release on that saying basically the same thing, that Bashar was an ally to to Israel and that they look forward to a long-term relationship. And then it was released only that one time in one Zionist magazine, and then that was it. And right after that, the revolution broke out.
Right, and
So
this is where we're faced with that whole thing that went on, and I think that people don't even believe, though, that there are, crimes against humanity going on in Syria.
no, the whole thing is whitewashed and covered. I tell you, there were photographs on Google.
Mhm.
Oh my God, amazing photographs taken of the revolution of people. There were millions of people in the streets all across Syria. I don't know how many million. A third of the population
Mm.
was in the streets protesting at the same time. And photographs of this were on Google at one time. And I mean, incredible photographs. And I've gone back looking for them. I can't find a single one. Doesn't matter what keywords I type in, I can't find them. They're not there. And in fact, a couple of them were changed, photoshopped to say this for the signs to read something else.
Mm.
Where they said out with Bashar, they then read, something else. That they were, trying to make them look like they were pro-Assad protest. So there is a massive whitewashing that has gone on when it comes to Syria, far beyond anything you see in Palestine. I mean, this stuff, the news about Palestine is getting out because the Palestinian people themselves have been publishing photographs on Facebook and social
Right.
networking, and that's how that happened. But in Syria, there's a third of the population inside Syria that is displaced from their homes due to Bashar's barrel bombs. Now,
Mm.
Bashar is using barrel bombs. These are internationally banned weapons. They cause the maximum casualties to civilians and the maximum destruction to infrastructure.
Mm.
And millions, he has destroyed entire cities. You cannot believe. If you just Google Homs City, destroyed, words like that. Google, Aleppo, any city you can find. A lot of the major cities in Syria, anywhere where the revolution where people were protesting in the beginning. These are the areas that Bashar targets. And to punish, he placed homes under a siege for I don't even know how long. It was something like 2 years. I don't even know what's going on right now.
Mm.
I mean, it's very hard to get any information about Syria, especially when you want details, you know.
Well,
But
yeah, that's been a trouble for me is that I want to, know what's going on there, and it's very difficult. I mean, that's one of the worst places to try and get on the ground information from at this point.
yes.
Um, this has bothered me, of course, because now we're watching again in American media how there's these bombings on the border there. We're going to have to engage ISIS there because they have they're going into and coming out of Syria, depending on who you're listening to. I mean, if you put that in context with what he was doing to his own people to begin with, what are we looking at here?
Well, let me tell you something. Human Rights Watch. Okay, America went in to bomb God knows what, right? How did we
Mm-hmm.
know what the hell they were even doing there? We were
Right.
completely lied to. They said they're going after ISIS. The Human Rights Watch report on the bodies that were killed, over 90% of them were al-Nusra. All right, who is al-Nusra? Well, al-Nusra was a branch. It started as a branch of Al-Qaeda.
Mm-hmm.
But they broke into their own cells, and not a single al-Nusra cell was taking orders from the main from Al-Qaeda. And they ended up merging with FSA completely and completely breaking off from Al-Qaeda. All right? And their sole purpose is fighting the regime. They're not terrorizing the people. FSA, Nusra, they're not. Al-Qaeda and ISIS, they are. And those are the foreign insurgents. And you won't hear this in the media. The media lumps them all together. The media conveniently, this is why people are brainwashed. Because the media will say the rebels, the opposition, did this or did that. And they could be referring to a crime done by Al-Qaeda, but then FSA and the true resistance gets blamed for it. This is how the brainwashing goes on. The original rebels were FSA. They were Syrian people and regime soldiers who defected from the regime because they refused to massacre their own people. So we have the right to resist. We have the right it's an international human right. And when it's the people themselves, like in Palestine with Hamas, those are Palestinian people. How dare we have no right to tell them what they should and shouldn't do, and what they should and shouldn't think, and how they should and shouldn't resist. They have every right to use force. It's not foreign insurgents in Gaza. These are Palestinian people, and we should be supporting them any way we can. And I truly believe the Palestinian people, they have the intelligence, and they're very resourceful and they're very efficient. They can take care of their own internal affairs once the occupation and the siege is lifted. They can do nothing right now. They're in constant trauma. They don't get a moment to breathe. Every 2 years, there's a bombing campaign that goes on there. And in Gaza, in Syria as well as in Gaza, you know what? The arms industries are making a lot of money. They're making a killing testing internationally banned weapons.
Mm.
And that's what this is all about. It's money. Gaza is nothing but a testing ground for arms industry, for Israeli and US arms industry. And these are crimes. The Syrian people, they're getting destroyed by Bashar's barrel bombs. Bashar is the only one who has helicopters. He's the only one who has an air force. Nobody else is dropping them. And you can't get news articles, you can't get news agencies to talk about it. Every once in a while, a report comes out from a human rights organization or Amnesty International or maybe the United Nations. And it talks about Bashar's crimes.
Right.
But not the news, not the media. A few alternative here and there.
Right, and what else is strange is that the only thing that they have let out of the bag there is this whole thing about chemical weapons, and of course, just like Saddam Hussein, he used chemical weapons on his own people. That got out there briefly, but
oh yeah.
but
Do you know what? Do you know what somebody told me? just the other day. She worked for a human rights organization in UK that's directly working in Syria, and she was engaged to a Syrian man who was in Dara, which is the place where the revolution broke out. She told me a lot of things. Oh my goodness, no, it wasn't her. It was a special ops who was stationed in Syria. Now I've been interviewing special ops, Navy SEALs, human rights organization, members of human rights organizations to try to gather up information.
Well, you're getting a wide spectrum of information to try and
Yeah.
determine what's actually going on, relating to
Well,
these stories, because the storyline that you're being
I
fed,
was going to
is
address
no
those
good. But
chemical weapons.
no, please do.
And
I
I
just
don't know if I can even find proof about this, but it's something that, anyway, I'll just throw it out there. If people don't hear it, they're never going to know.
okay.
Apparently, America gave chemical weapons to Saudi Arabia, who sold them to Bashar. And yes, Bashar has been using chemical weapons. And that's what the whole thing about them going in and getting the chemical weapons out of Syria was all about. Because on the boxing, on the casement of these chemical weapons, it says where they were made.
hmm
So, I don't have proof of that, but a good comparison to compare that to would be the Iran-Contra scandal, where Israel was caught selling weapons to Iran, the same weapons that Iran is now giving to Hamas and to Hezbollah.
Well, I'll
You
tell you.
see,
Let me
Israel
interject.
they
Let,
have to create the enemy in order
right.
for them to be able to go in and fight and take land.
Well, right. Let me interject something real
Yeah.
quick here, because I've interviewed several times on this show, and I'm going to have him back on again. A man who was actually renditioned during the entire torture situation in Iraq.
Hmm.
Okay, and he was there as a military intelligence operative. Okay.
Yeah, I remember you telling me this.
And what he discovered when he was there is that, Hussein did actually have chemical weapons. Unfortunately, for the narrative that has been pushed down our throats, he actually did have them. And the problem is that they came, from U.S. sources. Okay. So they
Hmm.
originated there. So, of course, yeah, we went after him to go get his weapons of mass destruction. We knew for sure he had them because we still had the receipts. That used to be the joke, right? Well, guess what? It seems like, same old over here with Syria is essentially, in one way or another, United States involved assets facilitated the sale of these weapons. And then afterwards, after these regimes use them, it seems as though we have to go in there to stop them from using these evil weapons that we put in their hands in the first place. Doesn't that story sound familiar? I'm thinking to myself while you're telling me, because I guarantee you, if you search long and hard enough, you're going to find somebody who can verify this. This is probably the very same game that's been played with Syria.
Absolutely. And Bashar was using chemical weapons many, many times, killing dozens of people at a time. Not such great numbers like in the Duma. It was a Duma massacre,
Mm,
where I think over 1,500 people were killed or something. But that chemical attack in Duma, it was actually, okay, those were troops that were trained in Jordan, and these were NATO troops. Um, NATO was training these militants. I don't know where the militants came from, doesn't matter, but they were deployed
hmm
and went on their way to Damascus, across the border in like August 18th or something, right before the chemical weapons attack. So
Right.
it clearly was them. Plus, RT News had satellite images and said that it was them. So, that was a big attack. That, if Bashar doesn't use them enough, they'll stage something, you know. But
hmm
they all work together, and the revolution. Okay, wait. I wanted to talk about the crimes, Bashar crimes, because you said people don't believe it. Well, I want to talk about the evidence that we do have, so people can actually go and look that up.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely. I want to get to that as well. I'm sorry I sidetracked you with it, but
no,
it
that's
was just
okay.
something I thought was necessary to point out, because this is one of the things that always comes up in a discussion about Syria and
Yeah.
and the regime there. The concept of the same thing like they did with Hussein, right? Where it was like, well, we need to stop him because he's, madman enough to use these things on his own people. Meanwhile, where did the weapons come from? It's just one of those things that I think is worthy of
Yeah.
pointing out. But the fact that the crimes against the Syrian people are not being focused on in the media, yeah, I'd love to provide people with a way to take a look at that and see it for themselves.
It's completely being whitewashed. And of course, whatever deal Bashar struck, and I'm completely convinced he struck a deal with the United States and with Israel. Absolutely. I mean, that's what those meetings had to have been about. And because the fact that his crimes are being whitewashed. And who owns the media? Well, they do. Um, he is allowed to do genocide on the people who resisted him. And he is only dropping barrel bombs on those areas where people have resisted. He's so bloody ruthless. He kept Home City under siege for more than 2 years. Okay, people starving, had snipers all the way around the vicinity. If anybody tried to go to get groceries, they had to go risk their lives under sniper fire. And starves people out. The Yarmouk refugee camp, full of Palestinian refugees. A few of those Palestinians sided with the FSA and let the FSA Nusra, who are like one, bunker down there. And so Bashar is punishing them. They've been under siege even long after FSA and Nusra left that refugee camp. He's been starving them out for almost a year and a half. And this is just, and he also attacked, the regime also attacked medics and humanitarian aid that was trying to be brought into the camp. I mean, he's ruthless and he's disgusting. And his prisons are nothing but torture dens. And he is torturing men, women, and children, mostly men, but also women and children, in those prisons.
Right.
And he doesn't just torture them for weeks or months. He does it for over a year. He keeps them alive for as long as he possibly can in order to inflict as much suffering as he can. And the United States has always sent political prisoners to Syria for torture, things that couldn't be done on U.S. soil. And the United States has a long history of just criminality with Syria. Now, I get so upset, it's hard for me to even focus, I swear. Okay, the United Nations, the human rights chief, did an official inquiry into Bashar and Assad war crimes in Syria.
Right.
And they found that the war crimes are authorized at the highest level of government, including by President Bashar al-Assad.
Right.
So this is something we need to understand. The United Nations understands it right now. Okay, Amnesty International has said the Syrian government they did also their own investigations. They one in particular, they bombed civilians in the city of Raqqa. There was a report published in March of 2015. I don't know why it was published so late. But anyway, it provides evidence that Bashar al-Assad's government forces unlawfully killed up to 115 civilians in a series of aerial attacks on Raqqa between the 11th and the 29th of November. So that's like less than, that's like 10 days, a week. So these were men, women, and children who he killed. Some of the attacks included air raids on a busy market crammed with civilians, a mosque, shops, transport hub, storage facility, and residential building. And it wasn't investigated, for a long time. Syrian government forces have flown. They have no regard for the rules of war whatsoever. I mean, I've never seen even a dictator do this to his own people. The U.S. State Department obtained, 27,000 photographs showing the emancipated, bruised, and burned bodies of Syrian torture victims. They're on display at the U.S. Holocaust Museum. They were on display in October. The Syrian government, how do they reply? If they're asked if they use barrel bombs, they say, oh, we don't use barrel bombs. They denounced these photographs too as fakes, but they were verified by the FBI, who said that there was no evidence of doctoring. Okay, there's more. The ICC, International Criminal Court, they have the top list of Syria war crimes. They have 55,000 photographs of bodies with gouged out eyes and, showing signs of starvation. Now, these were just civilians. These were people that are in prisons, that are held in prisons under torture.
Right.
And they're literally tortured to death, and they've been starved, they've been, genitals cut off, they've been mutilated. And these are people who resisted him. The people who come from an area that resisted, that held protests during the revolution.
Well, right, and in some cases there are civilians being punished that are simply in proximity to
That's right.
others who have stood up. It's not simply
That's right.
the people that have stood up and were directly, tortured as enemies of the state. I know this factually that there have been plenty of, cases of what we would almost describe as collateral damage, but it seems to me to be a lesson to the population to police themselves, to turn people out of their villages, their towns, whatever, that have anything negative to say, because any sort of resistance will be met with force. And
Yes.
this is what I'm gleaming, but it's very hard for me to do, because again, the flow of information has been highly restricted coming out of Syria. And if you're going to rely again on any of the American alleged journalists, you're not going to get any of this. None of it.
No. I've known journalists that have gone into Syria. They can't 1/100th of what they're seeing. They report just stupid stuff, war porn.
Hmm.
That's it. Photographs of this and that, and that's all you see. You don't hear why. Or, you don't hear what's behind those pictures. Oh,
Yeah, you're allowed to display, destroyed buildings and a few things like this, destroyed vehicles, you know,
people running for their lives.
people running
Um,
for their lives, but the actual body counts, the fact that civilians are being absolutely decimated in certain areas, again, just for being in proximity to people like Al Nusra and all that. This is what is actually.
Oh yeah, if you're from the wrong neighborhood, if you're an educated person or a doctor, if you're from home city, you're a target. Period. And it's on your identification. So a lot of people have a hard time can't get out of Syria. If they have to cross, you have to cross like something like 12 checkpoints to get from Damascus to Lebanon.
Hmm.
Some of those checkpoints are FSA and some of them are regime. So you're dealing with two sides that don't trust anybody. And if you pass through a regime, people bribe their way out. They have it's very hard to get out. It really is.
Well, there's a lot of that stuff. Whenever there is a sort of a war-torn area, this kind of thing happens, and bribery is one of the few ways that you can possibly traverse, the areas that are
Right.
controlled by two sides of a conflict. I'm well aware of that, and that
You know,
happens
people
everywhere.
people in Jordan are selling their organs. And not in Jordan, sorry, in Lebanon.
Mm,
People in Lebanon, the Syrian people, the refugees, they've been selling their organs. Just like because you can survive with one kidney.
right.
They get $10,000 and they buy themselves an illegal way out of Lebanon. The refugees in Lebanon and in Jordan have no rights. They cannot leave. They cannot go to another country. They're forbidden. They won't be allowed to fly. Another thing that is so horrible is that if they accept financial help, they have from any international body, they have to apply as a refugee first. And if they apply as a refugee, they might get 300 equivalent of like $300-400 or something like this.
Hmm.
So they're able to eat, but they are forced to go into a refugee camp, and they're not allowed to leave. Zatari camp is filled with 150,000 people, and
Right.
they're not allowed to leave. It's out in the desert. It's far removed from Amman, from any city in Jordan. Nobody ever sees them, and they're trapped. They're stuck, and they can stay there and be there for years. And they can't study, they can't work, they can't do anything, progress in their lives, nothing. And it's horrible. This is how they're treated. There's no rehabilitation. Also, the majority of them have suffered extreme trauma.
Right.
Children who lost their parents right in front of their eyes, and there's no rehabilitation for them.
Right. I mean, there's nothing in the way of actually taking care of the wounded, whether they've been physically wounded. I mean, there's very minimal in these refugee
Right.
camps at the moment, and a lot of people are not, again, seeing this side of things. What I'm wondering, because we're coming down to like about the last 15 minutes here,
Okay.
as we look forward, right, and we're watching the setup. Okay, and I call it the setup. I know it sounds like I'm being, callous about human beings, but I'm not, because this is what is being related to us, this big setup about how this is going to be again justified because we are pursuing, the newest Islamic boogeyman, okay, that they're presenting to us one way or another, that, want to inflict their crazy ideas on us and everything else. So we are fully justified in all these things we're doing, and none of this story is getting out about what's actually happening to the people on the ground there. All of that is developing. You're watching it happen in real time. What do you think this is going to mean going forward, for this already extremely under duress population, that for the most part was not involved in this conflict on either side. They weren't necessarily resisting the regime. They're not, ISIS sympathizers or whatever the hell they're supposed to be to make them our enemies. These people that are caught in the middle, I mean, what do you see coming as this continues to unfold?
Well, okay, there's an estimated between 7 and 12. I don't know. Nobody knows the number. I've heard 7 million. I've heard more. People who are internally displaced inside of Syria, and they have nothing. Then there's 3 million refugees living outside of Syria. That's 10 million people right there. It could be higher, and it probably is. There's only 30 million Syrians. Okay, this is a third of the population or more. And these people have suffered some very extreme trauma. But our world governments, United States, is organizing for Bashar to remain in power for another couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
That means more genocide. I don't know. I don't have an answer. The world has to stand up and say, no, we're not going to tolerate this. We are the power. We are everything. They're scared of us. If we unite, and we have social media, if we need to have an anti-Zionist movement, because Zionism is what's doing this to the Syrian people and to Palestine. Zionism is what's taking our freedom and enslaving us and putting us into debt, and hijacking our governments and doing false flag terror attacks all over the world. Mm-hmm. Zionism is doing this. Their headquarters are in Israel and the United States, Pentagon. That's their headquarters. If you want to know where the criminals are, they're operating through the CIA and the Mossad. Mm-hmm. And this needs to stop. Those are the two most powerful terrorist organizations on the planet. Muslims are not terrorists. If you look at the statistics, Muslims are really far down on the list of terror attacks that have ever taken place in America. That's the fact. People are too stupid and too lazy to go on the internet and look for themselves. If people knew the facts, maybe that they would think differently.
Right. It wouldn't be so easy to sell them
another thing I forgot to mention, but it popped back in my head.
No, go ahead.
2.5 months into the revolution, into the bombing of the United States Air Force in Syria. And who were they targeting? Over 90% of the dead bodies that they targeted were al-Nusra. Mm-hmm. Okay? Why is that? Weren't they there supposed to be fighting ISIS? Why did they kill Nusra? Why did they go after Nusra? Well, I have a theory on that. Because Nusra completely broke off of Al-Qaeda. And guess who funded them and trained them and sent them to Syria in the first place? Well, CIA and Mossad.
Mhm.
So, United States, this cabal, is pissed off at them. The United States Air Force went after Nusra first because Nusra disconnected from them and said, fuck it. Excuse my language. Whoops.
It's all
We're
right.
live.
No, it's okay. We are live, and it's fine. You know what? When you step out of line with the Al Qaeda, okay, of course you're going to get punished. That's the way it goes. I mean, anybody who understands this stuff at all knows that that was the creation of the Western intelligence in collaboration with the Mossad. That's all that ever was. They were born out of our backing of the alleged Mujahideen, okay, and all of that whole construct was all nonsense. It was all absolutely controlled opposition in order to further the agenda, so that Iraq could become balkanized and the entire region would begin to suffer in this way. This has all been done by design, and it was
Yeah.
through those mechanisms that they did this. So of course they're going to go after al-Nusra. They were more interested in, opposing the regime in Syria, which, the U.S. does not want to decapitate that regime at this moment. It's serving a purpose,
That's right.
you know.
That's right. They're making a lot of money. These criminal bankers are making a lot of money through, arms industries, organ trafficking and sex trafficking. That's what they're doing. And ISIS is there. ISIS has full control over Syria's oil. I interviewed a former FSA guy who's inside Syria.
Hmm.
He's now doing humanitarian work. And that's what he said. He said that, and I've been able to verify this from other people too, that ISIS controls Syria's oil 100%. And they're selling it to Bashar, who's turning around and selling it to China and Russia for a profit. They're also selling it to Nusra and FSA, who sells it to Turkey for a profit and helps to fund their resistance. So ISIS controls all of Syria's oil. They're also shipping it to Iraq. There's one more thing I wanted to mention. Najib, I can't say this name, Gadbian, the National Coalition, who works for the National Coalition of Syrian Revolution and Opposition Forces. He's a representative to the UN. He said that in the past year alone, Assad regime has killed over 32,000 people, 75% of whom are civilians. And in contrast, ISIS has killed 3,657 people, 85% of whom were military targets.
Hmm.
So this is something to ponder, Now there's 150,000 people being held in Syrian prisons right now, according to this man, but he says it could be as high as 230,000. So these are people being held under torture. And in 2014, the regime arrested 7,000 people, including children, with a further 9,000 missing. And that's where we're at right now. The only thing that's going to save us, to be honest, and I've thought about this for years, is a revolution using technology. I mean, connecting from wherever we are all over the planet, through the internet, through a movement, maybe anti-Zionist movement, one that hits the heart and the core of the issue. And, I've thought about why not having musicians, art has always been at the center of revolution.
Hmm.
Why not have a group of musicians, live streaming around the clock on the internet and revealing the truth through music, through a powerful message, create, something like that. We have the internet is the most powerful tool that we have. That is how we can connect with each other.
Well, in order to give the artists the information to begin to draw on to be able to do this, we're going to have to get the information out there more, and it's just not out there at the moment, Ariana. It just simply isn't. I mean, I know you're well aware of this, but it's not really getting out there, on a widespread basis. I wanted to.
I want to use an example here of something that just happened. The Hamas movement in Gaza just did a social experiment, and they did a Twitter storm called Ask Hamas, hashtag Ask Hamas. And So they were going to do it for 5 days. They did it for only 3. And on the third day, they reached 4.5 million people. So there were people who they opened a dialogue, question and answer, where people could ask them questions and they would give direct answers. And I was really surprised by some of the answers, you know? And this is what it builds that human connection. And, you know, that's just a perfect example of how social media can reach people. And also, you know, there was another instance where we can reach our senators and our congressmen through Twitter. We can do Twitter storms. We can ask them to do what we want. And if there's enough tweets, they're going to listen.
Mm.
That's the reality. We have the power. We just need to be organized. We need to use what we've got. And, you know, you're right. Your radio shows like yours and the Liberty Beacon, you know, are growing fast because we can actually share real news.
Well, right, and that is absolutely the point. And you know what? At the end of the day, I really just encourage everybody to not necessarily believe everything that I say or that I present on this show, but I tell them to go out there and find it for themselves, to understand the world for themselves, to become educated and aware, and not to simply buy into the propaganda which is being forced on us all the time. This is what this is the step I'm at anyway, you know. And if we do that more, you know, these types of realities hitting home with people might get them to understand that something needs to be done. And I'm not sure if a Twitter storm is going to solve it, but it might be a step. Let's take any step we can to make as much noise as we can to get people to pay attention to what's actually happening. Don't just buy the line of crap that's being fed to you by the alphabet soup of the dying mainstream media. You know, this is why we're doing what we're doing. Not just, you know, it's not like I want to become, you know, somebody famous and all that kind of stuff, or I want to make sure that you become a well-known name. I want the information out there. I want people to become more aware of the realities, not the deceptions. And that's what it's all about. Ariana, if there's anywhere where you want people to find you, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I want you to, you know, get your final thoughts out there, and also, you know, if people want to get in contact with you, tell them how.
Okay, well, I think through Twitter it's at WB Gaza Free, at WB Gaza Free, which stands for West Bank Gaza Free. It just was something I created one day, but it's grown quite big. All of my information comes to that page. Or Facebook also, it's under my name. Yeah, I think that we definitely have to support alternative sources of information because that's where it's at. I mean, human to human contact, you know, people who have been in these places, lived there, they can tell you better than anybody. I never would have known the things I know now if I didn't go to Palestine and if I didn't go to Jordan and meet with the refugees and speak with them directly, you know, because it's not the narrative that we're fed. The reality is not the narrative that we're fed in the media.
That's for sure. And look, I want to thank everybody who tuned in tonight to the Ochelli Effect. I do forget to mention the name of the show toward the end, but I do thank you. And for those of you catching it further down line, absolutely. And hopefully we'll do this again with Ariana Love, because, you know, this type of information is, again, something that I even have to plead ignorance on to some degree. And it's unfortunate because it's not as though I don't care about everybody on every single continent, regardless of whether they're awake, aware, agree with me, hate me or not. I would like to see all of humanity survive a whole lot better and not have to bow down to the controllers that absolutely have a stranglehold over just about every single thing that truly does matter to us as human beings. I think that freedom is one of those things that is not free, that's for sure, but we all can be if we learn to stand together, speak together, and try to make a difference, at the very least, in our own minds and among our own populations. We may not bend the will of those who seek to control us, but we will actually achieve victory through changing the minds of others and through educating them and getting them to